What is up, and welcome back to Brett's Bets, presented by Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers, where we pick winners in a handful of college football matchups each week to prove our expertise. I am your host, Brandon Silvers. Quick reminder that we use gambling spreads and terminology, but we don't condone gambling, particularly if it's not legal where you are, because we're not built for prison. This is for entertainment only. So with that being said, it is once again my honor to welcome my co-host for Brett's Bets, a man who is so good at picking games that we've had to hide his identity. He simply knows too much. As a result, I can't tell you his name, but he does have several aliases. Please welcome the Spartanburg Spread Beater, a.k.a. the Irmo Earner, a.k.a. the Columbia Coverer, a.k.a. the Florence Forecaster, a.k.a. the Atlanta Assassin with the sniper sight trained right on your bookie's chest. Originally from Landrum, a.k.a. L-Town, but he's not taking any L's this week. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the experts.
All right, so another winning week last week. Finally getting on a little bit of a roll here. Finally demonstrating some success. So this week, we're going to absolutely keep it rolling. We've got 5 games that I really like here. And they are all not only underdogs, they're all road underdogs. This feels like a week that the dogs are going to be barking. So all road underdogs this week.
Much like yourself the previous weeks, but you've bounced back and shown resolve. So I'm excited to see what your picks are and how those underdogs look compared to you. So first up, we've got game 1. This is the Mia pick of the week. 2-2 Purdue at number 21 Minnesota on Saturday at noon on ESPN2 in one of those Big Ten matchups that make me hate life. Minnesota is favored by 12. Let's hear the underdog pick of the week, the Mia underdog pick of the week.
All right. So Mia, God rest her soul, passed away this year. She was a beautiful beagle, born in Moncks Corner, South Carolina. She was my dog that I got several years ago with my family, and she lived a great life, and this pick is dedicated to her. So we're going Purdue plus 12. So here's the thing. Before the season, the spread on this game was only 3. So major changes have taken place to get it all the way up to 12. Minnesota was a 3-point favorite. Now they're a 12-point favorite. So Minnesota has just become the darlings of Vegas. Vegas is ranking them now in the top 10. I think they're 21 or something like that in the polls, but Vegas has got them all the way up to 9, I believe, in their power rankings. They've looked good. They've got the best defense in the country statistically. They just got through dismantling Michigan State on the road. But to me, I'm not overly impressed. I think they're good, but Michigan State's probably just terrible. They're very injured and they're not good to begin with. Last year was just a flash in the pan. I don't think they're really that good of a team. So I'm not taking a whole lot from Minnesota beating them the way they did. And aside from Michigan State, they've played nobody with a pulse whatsoever. So this number 1 defense, all these rushing yards they're putting up, all of that is, I think you got to take it with a grain of salt. Purdue, on the other hand, they've played a tougher schedule. They're more tested. They should have beaten Penn State to start the year out. Very unlucky to lose that game. A couple weeks ago, they went to Syracuse, which is not an easy game anymore, as we've seen this year. They should have won that ball game. They outgained them by well over 100 yards, and they lost that game right at the end. Last week, they barely beat Florida Atlantic, but their starting quarterback wasn't playing. So we think Purdue's a lot better than they're giving credit for, and we think Minnesota is not quite as good as they're getting credit for. The way to beat Purdue, as we know from this year and last year, you've got to be able to throw the ball. They've got a solid run defense, but they can be very exploited on the back end. Well, Minnesota doesn't really do that. They run first, and any passing yards they get is just because they've set up the run. So we don't think it's the best matchup for Minnesota. And like I said, we think Minnesota's a little overrated. So if the big caveat here is if Purdue's starting quarterback is back and healthy, we are going to place that bet on Purdue plus 12.
Boom. There you have it. The Mia underdog pick of the week. Next up, we've got the Maddie underdog pick of the week. 2-2 Virginia hits the road to take on Duke Saturday at 7:30 on ESPN3, which doesn't sound like a real channel, but it is. Duke is favored by a field goal. Both teams coming off tough losses last week. What is your pick and why?
All right. So Maddie is another Beagle that we got soon after Mia. She is still alive, thankfully. And from the moment we brought her home, she drove poor Mia crazy. Just dominated her. She was the alpha dog from the beginning, even as a puppy that was a tenth of the size of Mia. And that's kind of how I think about this Virginia team. They don't score a lot, but they are stout on defense. They're not going to let you get anything on them. So we're going Virginia plus 3 here. So it's a little bit similar of a story as last game. Virginia's only 2-2, as you said, but they're a lot more tested. They've played tougher teams. If you look at their results, they're not very impressive on their face, but they've been in a lot of close games. The defense has played really well. Duke, on the other hand, they're 3-1. They were 3-0 going into the game with Kansas last week, and that was a pretty big game. The two basketball schools, so to speak, facing off undefeated in football, Duke and Kansas. But before that, Duke had not beaten anybody whatsoever. The Northwestern win looked a little impressive for them, but now we know Northwestern is just absolutely putrid. So Duke hasn't done anything whatsoever. Virginia's a lot more tested. And this spread actually come out at, I think, 2 or 2.5. And when I first looked at it, it was a little fishy because basically when a away team is only a 2-point dog, they're telling you that that's the better team. And I was like, well, how can that be if Duke's 3-1, they're 2-2? But if you look at it for 5 minutes, you see Virginia probably is the better team here. Like I said, more tested, definitely better defense. So, yeah, we're going to take them with the field goal that might actually come into play. It should be a low-scoring game. And, Duke, they've not proven anything this year. And this is the first one of the exceedingly few times over the last decade probably that they've even been favored at all in a conference game. There's a reason for that. They're just not good at football, really. So we're taking Virginia here plus the points.
The Maddie underdog pick of the week. Next up, we have the Kobe, aka the Beyond the Bark pick of the week. You picked this because it is another Big Ten matchup, unfortunately for me, but it's Illinois. They're going to Wisconsin to play Wisconsin. Wisconsin, the cheese state. Kobe, big fan of cheeses of all types. Big cheese guy. So, as I said, going to be Saturday noon in Wisconsin on the Big Ten Network. The return of former Wisconsin head coach Brett Bielema, remember that guy? And Wisconsin is favored by a touchdown.
All right, the pick here is Illinois plus 7. The reason Wisconsin is favored here is simply because their name is Wisconsin and the other team's name is Illinois. Illinois is probably actually the better team here. They've definitely played a tougher schedule. They've got more impressive wins on the resume. Their defense is legit. And they can run the ball as Brett Bielema teams do. So they're looking very solid this year. Virginia, who we just picked, Illinois beat them 24-3. So we think they're very solid. The only game they lost this year was on the road at Indiana, which, that's, Indiana's not very good, but they had that game won. Very unlucky to lose that at the end on last minute touchdown they gave up. So we think Illinois is pretty good, and Wisconsin has done nothing whatsoever this year. They lost at home to Washington State as a 17-point favorite. They just got blew out last week by Ohio State, as many teams will have happened to them also. But yeah, we simply think Wisconsin is overvalued here. And they may win the game, but these Big Ten games are slugfests. That 7 points is going to go a long way. And we think we've got at least an even team, if not the better team, with Illinois, and we're getting a full touchdown. So easy pick here, Illinois +7.
The Kobe Beyond the Bark underdog of the week. If you're watching this video, go check out Kobe's Beyond the Bark NFL pick videos as well. All right, the Maverick underdog pick of the week. Number 10, NC State heads to the most dangerous place to be a sheep to take on number 5, Clemson, Saturday, 7:30 on ABC. Clemson won a tough one last week in overtime against Wake Forest and is favored by 6.5. What are you thinking?
All right. As you know by now, we're taking the road underdog. We're taking North Carolina State +6.5. Very good sheep reference because the Maverick pick, Maverick is a German Shepherd. He is I was thinking wolf. I was going to go with the wolf pack. He's as big as a wolf. He's like 120 pounds, but sheep, better reference. The German Shepherd is going to take it to the sheep F-worders in Clemson here. So basically, Clemson is just still overvalued. They had an incredible run, and Vegas just can't seem to forget about it. They weren't, they were a shell of themselves last year, and they were still favored in just about every game they played by a wide margin. Vegas is kind of doing the same thing again this year. They're just making them favorites where maybe they shouldn't be that big of a favorite. So Clemson scored a lot of points last week against Wake Forest. Well, one, Wake Forest has no defense whatsoever. And two, if you actually watch that game, they were 3rd and 10 like every time. And DJ would just throw a ball up, and, one of their big receivers, Ngata or whoever, would go up and get it over a little Wake Forest guy. So we think they were very lucky to score as much as they did. And North Carolina State ain't going to let that happen to them. If you get 3rd and long with them, they are going to get after you. They call a ton of blitzes, complex pressures. It's an excellent, excellent defense there for North Carolina State. So we definitely like them to stay within the number just because the defense is so good. The offense is pretty solid as well. They're balanced. The offense has been a little bit of a disappointment, but they can run the ball. We know from last year the quarterback is solid. And we know that Clemson's DBs are weak. From watching the game last week, Wake Forest threw all over them. North Carolina State's probably not going to put up 45 or whatever it was that Wake Forest put up, but they'll put up a good bit. So we think North Carolina State can definitely stay within this 6.5 here. Just great defense, balanced offense, and Clemson is just not who they used to be.
Thank God. The Maverick underdog pick of the week. Next up, we have the Luka Memorial pick of the week. Number 7, Kentucky heads to Ole Miss to take on number 14, the Running Rebels, Saturday at noon on ESPN. Ole Miss favored by 6.5 as well. And their passing game hasn't looked quite as explosive as I thought with Southern Cal transfer Jackson Dart. But are we keeping with the theme? Clearly we are. So tell us why we're going with the underdog here.
Yeah. So Luka tragically passed away this year. He wasn't even 5 years old yet. But in those 4.5 years, he was a hell of a bird dog, hell of a hunting dog, and an even better family companion. And I miss him every day. So this is for Luka. So yeah, we're going Kentucky +6.5. So basically both of these teams are a little overrated. Kentucky is ranked number 7. They're not the 7th best team in the country. Ole Miss, I think, is somewhere in the teens. They're probably not that good either. So both of these teams are a little overrated, but when you look at the matchup, so let's look at Ole Miss. They've not really played anybody yet, and they've not looked terribly impressive in the wins that they've had. So we know Lane Kiffin. We know how he likes to throw the ball. He's always got a good offense. We know last year they had Matt Corral slinging it around. They've not got that passing game going at all, like you said. They've beat teams just by running the ball down their throat, which is good. They have a legitimately strong run game. Zach Evans, transfer, former 5-star they got. They got another kid who's carrying the ball a lot that's really good. So they can run the ball. But you've got to have more bullets in the gun when you face this Kentucky defense. They are very solid. They did lose some talent from last year, but they're just a very well-coached defensive team up there with Mark Stoops. If all you can do is run the ball, you're not going to score. You've got to be balanced. You've got to be a great offense to score on them. So Kentucky, they've not done a lot on offense. They've got Will Levis, who is probably going to be a first-round pick, but, he's not super impressive. But they do get their superstar running back this week, Rodriguez. So that's going to help them a lot. So we think they're going to be able to do enough offensively to keep up. But the main thing is we think they're going to play very well defensively against an unbalanced Ole Miss team. So yeah, we're going Kentucky here, plus the 6.5.
Luka was definitely more loyal than Lane Kiffin. So this is fitting.
Yes.
Well, that's going to do it for this week. I've got Hurricane Ian headed my way. And so I will hopefully have electricity to watch these games. But this has been another edition of Brett's Bets. So thank you for joining.
Thank you.